when you can feel your gut response, or you can feel your heart starting to flutter, you can feel things in your body, your intuition speaks through your body. So if you're not comfortable in your body, then we'll have a block to intuition.
Welcome to the Story of Spirit podcast, where practical spirituality meets real life. Hi, I'm your host, Sheetal Story. I'm a psychic medium, grief support counselor, professional astrologer, and a human design reader, and of course, a law of attraction master coach. With my unique blend of spiritual and practical tools, I am here to help you align with your soul-led purpose and ignite a life that sets your soul on fire. In this podcast, we are going to explore the principles of energy, astrology, spirituality, and psychology to help you heal your grief and create an aligned life and business from the inside out. Whether you are looking to deepen your intuition, understand your cosmic design, or transform your business, this podcast is for you. Join me each week for insightful discussions, practical tips, and inspiring stories that will guide you on your journey to living your very best life. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Sheetal Story or wherever you listen to this podcast. Let's dive in and start this transformative journey together. Welcome to the Story of Spirit podcast.
Today, we are going to talk about intuition. Now, intuition it feels very magical, doesn't it? It's like information that comes to you out of nowhere. And it's not out of nowhere. It is actually being tapped in to the energetic world and feeling energy before you might even have the words to express it. I think there's also a psychological way to explain intuition, and that is through your subconscious. Your subconscious is taking in everything in your environment, and yet it is sort of 80% of your awareness is there, but you don't know because it's in your subconscious. So especially if you have ADHD or autism, you are sifting through large amounts of information very quickly. Sometimes not very quickly, depends on where you are on the spectrum. But if you are neurodivergent, there is going to be actually a superpower that comes with that, because you sift through large amounts of information very quickly through your brain, and you just have an awareness of the answer or where you need to go, or why you don't know why. You just know that this is it, right? So in terms of your intuition, it can be, explained through the subconscious or through energy. And, whether it's one or the other, I actually don't really care. I feel like your intuition can be strengthened the more that you bring your awareness to it and you trust yourself. So today we're going to talk about the 3 blocks to your intuition and then the antidotes to it. One of the questions that I get every time we start talking about intuition as well is, how do I know it's my intuition, right? Because we're so smart. We're so brilliant. We're going to talk about the mind as being, one of the blocks to your intuition, because you can't hear the whispers of your soul if your mind is so loud. So we can often misunderstand or aren't sure whether it is intuition or not. So the way that I discern the difference between intuition and this is from teaching hundreds of students, is intuition is expansive and fear or the mind is contractive. So the mind likes to stay in the known and it wants to keep you safe. So it's always going to play out scenarios in your mind that is trying to keep you safe so that you're aware of what's going to happen. You're ready for any situation, right? And it's this overthinking mind that can create these fears that we're like, oh my God, is this going to happen? Or I had a dream about someone's going to die. Are they going to die? Because we're so much in fear that this could be a bad thing. Am I seeing bad things coming to me? And I always like to say, like, if that's the case, then why? Like, to what purpose would you be having that experience? So there are a few people in my communities, in my students, that have dreams of things that are going to happen. And I like to sort of ask them, or to tell spirit, like, if I don't want to see this, and don't show it to me, because the truth is you have agency. You are able to control your gift. So if you don't want to see the thing, you don't want to have these sort of dreams, then you can say, I don't want to have these dreams. But I always like to think, if I can see the future, then I have some sort of agency to change it or to be prepared for it, right? So I have a client who in the past, she had dreams, and she would dream of people passing away, and then they would pass away. So I asked her, I was like, why, does she had this fear, like she's going to dream of someone she knows dying and they're going to die. And I said, so did you cause their death? She said, well, I don't think so. And I said, okay, so what's the fear? Like you're seeing something that is going to transpire. So what is the benefit of this? Like how could you use this to help everyone? She said, well, if I know someone's going to pass, then maybe I can get in touch with them and talk to them and spend time with them. I said, that's awesome. Or you can encourage others to do the same. So even though I can get a feeling of a time window in which spirit is transitioning, I don't actually know their final date. I can tell that vitality is transitioning to spirit. I can feel that energy, and so can you. It's not remarkable to me anyways, but if you're sitting with someone who is in transition, meaning they're about to die, then you can feel their vitality is starting to dwindle. They don't have as much energy. Their body doesn't have the energy to power up all of its systems. So that energy is starting to move out of the body and into the world of energy. And as they take their last breath, the energy then moves right into the world of energy. That's it. It's instantaneous. There is no paying the piper or having to atone for your sins or, purgatory. There's no such thing. You just step into the world of energy. And the concept in heaven and hell, or God and the devil, are created by religion. So there is just consciousness, and we all transition back into the world of pure consciousness energy. And in the world of energy, we have levels that our vibration then gives us access to. So if you're a very spiritual person and you've done a really great, you're very loving and you're very aware of the world around you, you then will transition back into spirit very quickly because you understand you're an energetic being having this human experience and this is temporary. Now, if you believed that your transition was bad, traumatic, or you didn't deserve to die, like you don't deserve atonement. So let's say you lived a very bad life and you were very mean to people, you killed people, you really, acted very badly against others, then when you step into the world of spirit, you are going to then have an experience of maybe I shouldn't be here, right? You're going to be at a lower vibration than if you lived a life of love and stepping into spirit with surrounded by love and people, maybe even the priest giving you last rites, this awareness of I deserve the afterlife versus I don't deserve the afterlife. So even that, you step into the world of energy in a more positive energy, but everyone steps into energy, right? There is nothing, even people who are bad have people that love them in spirit, right? It's hard. And even what is bad, when we look back on people's lives and their environment in which they grew up, yes, there's people in your life that have done bad things to you and they didn't come out of the womb that way, right? I know that might be hard to hear. And so there's just this awareness. I know it was big for me when I was a beginning medium, when I said to my teacher, well, I don't want to read for people that aren't good. And she said, it is not for you to decide. How dare you act as the judge and the executioner? You don't get to decide what is good and not good. If there is a loved one coming for the person that you are reading for, then you are a intermediary between spirit, you're a channel, and you're supporting that love. Whatever is happened on the other sides or whoever's perspective on that, you don't get to judge that. And I understood very clearly in that moment that we are all loved. Even the most heinous people in history had people who loved them. It's very interesting when we start to think of it from that lens. So as we come back, then intuition is expansive, right? We have this awareness of things, and its expansion doesn't mean that it feels good. So even if like I had that, the awareness to do the podcast, right, that dropped in, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I knew that was not my fear because my fear wouldn't tell me to do something that was outside of my comfort zone, right? I always like to say also, we're using our discernment. So even with that, yeah, you're supposed to start a podcast. Okay. Everyone's got a podcast now. Well, I'm supposed to have one too. Okay. Show me then. Show me. I love using that word that term because then spirit gets to show you. And here's the thing, if you say show me, then you have to take the aligned action when you are shown, right? It's not like I need a sign your sign, I know who's listening to this. You get to is no more sign your signs, right? Take the first sign as that's it and let's go. So yeah, even when the first person came around and said, "Oh, I'm a podcast coach," and I was like, that's a weird coincidence, right? There's no such thing as coincidence. Everything is divinely timed. And so I said, yes, hey, I think I need to work with you. Like I extended the invitation and she said, I'm interested. Tell me more, right? And then the second person came along and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe you could support me in this way. And they're like, I would love to. So I saw the opportunity and then I asked for it, right? I asked, I said, I did my part, right? So if the universe has given you their part, then you have to do your part too. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to wait for the next train. I mean, you don't know when that next train is going to be around. It might be 50 years, So, but what's meant for you will always come back around in a different way, right? So let me tell you, with the podcast, my beautiful coach, I was quite resistant at the beginning. I'm like, well, how much are you gonna be, and like, when do we have the time for this? And I don't know. And when she's like, how about we launch in September? It's January now. We got lots of time. And I was like, fine, I guess we're gonna have to do it. It was so interesting because there was a part of me that knew I have to do this. This is my next step. I'm scared as hell of where this is gonna go, what this is gonna look like. But you know what? If it's meant for me, then it's got to show up in these ways. And it totally curated in that way. So what's meant for me always finds me. My intuition is leading me down a path that is my divine right. It's my soul's purpose. And I just get to say yes as the step shows itself to me. But we're not trying to push anything, right? Pusher energy is the mind, it's the ego. It is not your intuition. I'll give you an example. I had a wonderful lady who was in my MIA Academy membership, and we were talking about intuition and manifestation. And over the summer, she quit her job, gave their house up for lease, and they moved to Vancouver Island. And she didn't have a job, she didn't have a home, she has a young child, and they couldn't find anything. Like, it was nothing, no housing. They were living in sort of an Airbnb for a time, not long term in terms of cost effective that way. She couldn't find a job. Like, it was very clear to her, like the universe was like, no. Sometimes the universe says yes, sometimes the universe says no. And in this case, the universe said no. And she had to come back. And she was so disheartened, right? She's like, how did I not see the signs? And I said, can you share with me what the signs were that you thought said go? And because it was a Mercury retrograde over the summer, so not a time to move. She went with no job offer, no housing in hand, and no school for her son. So I was like, you went with nothing. Like, the universe would meet you. If that was meant for you, then everything would have lined up. So where were the signs? And she said, I just kept getting this nudge from within me. And I said, how do you know it's not from your ego? And she said, well, obviously I know now it's from my ego because nothing lined up. It's like, that is correct. So there's nothing wrong with your intuition, and she's feeling that she's meant to be there. That is truth, right? That is truth. Where she got a little messed up was the timing, right? The timing was off. She's going to be there, but she needs to lay foundations first. She needs to get a job opportunity, something that transfers out there. She has to find a place out there, all the things. And she's not just going by herself. She has, a family that she's also moving with her. So in those instances, the universe wasn't lining her up, but she wanted so badly. Sometimes we can see the future, but we don't know how to get there. And that can be very frustrating. So I knew I was going to be a psychic medium and a coach, helping women step into their gifts, helping them to navigate making their purpose a reality and doing the thing that lights them up in their life. But I couldn't get there yet. Each year I would say to my astrology teacher, is it now? Is it now? And she's like, no, no. And I was like, oh, I wanted it so badly. I could see the light on the horizon. I knew what this life was going to feel like. Like, I have to pinch myself. I'm living that life now. So many years I wanted this, and here I am today. So intuition is expansive, even though it can be a little scary, and it will support you. The universe will bring you steps to support that. Whereas your ego lives in fear. So it's telling you things that are actually kind of fearful, contractive. It is not something that lives in the expansive, optimistic, oh my God, this could be possible. And yeah, it could be possible, kind of scary, but at the same time, it's very supportive. And whether you listen to your intuition or not, you're going to get evidence, right? So if he said, if your intuition said, take this route home, and you're like, that's crazy. Why would I go that? That's a longer way. And you go your usual way home and you run into an accident that now adds an hour to your commute. Guess what? You got evidence that your intuition was right, right? So whether you do or you don't, you're going to get the lesson, right? I always say. So trust your intuition with discernment, right? If it feels safe. If it doesn't feel safe, then ask the universe, show me, right? Show me. So the 3 blocks to your intuition. And it's really interesting because all 3 blocks are rooted in the same thing. And I keep seeing this from people who are not trauma informed and trauma trained. So I am a grief support counselor. And psychology, and I have a lot of certifications, but I am not a certified counselor or psychologist. So I want to be very clear on that. I always send people who want to come to me for grief counseling if they have deeper underlying issues. I love to refer to psychologists that can support you in that. And if you're looking for a spiritual grief counseling and moving through grief in a spiritual way with the tools, tactics, and strategies of psychology, I got you. I love doing that work too, because I know on the other side of grief is a massive transformation. But that is a topic for another day. So, what are the blocks to intuition? And I realized this when I realized this in one of my psychology classes, actually, that I was like, oh my God, intuition is actually rooted in trauma. No, I was shocked. Intuition is rooted in trauma. If you grew up in a volatile childhood, if you grew up with alcoholic or drug addicted parents, if you grew up in families that moved around a lot and you had to adapt to surroundings, you are going to have a killer intuition. What? Why? Because you have to keep a finger on the pulse of what everybody thinks of you and what is going on in order to maintain safety for yourself. So you will have an awareness, an ability to tune in to people's feelings and what's happening in the energy of spaces and places around you. So if you're, volatile childhood, or I have clients that had, grew up in alcoholic homes, or homes where there was multiple divorces, there's going to be a destabilization that the child is going to try to find stability, right? The child needs stability. So the child will then try to maintain stability by being super kind, super considerate, taking care of their parents, being as good as possible, right? Good girl syndrome. Who has good girl syndrome? Raise your hand. I do. And that was because when I achieve, I receive, right? Whether you achieve in sports, in school, being a good girl gets you accolades. Being a problem gets you punishment, right? So we are wired as babies, as children, to go towards feeling good, but also going towards feeling safe within our family unit. So if you are ostracized, there's something that is, the word I'm looking for is challenging connection, you will drop authenticity for connection, because connection is needed for biological safety. So you will drop your authenticity, drop your funny humor, drop your childlike wonder in order to be safe, to take care of everything around you, and to make sure that you are safe within your family unit and that your parents like you, right? So you will drop your authenticity for connection. And the way then you are then minimizing your emotions to stay connected to your parents, and you are going to be checking in with them, and not just checking in with them going, are we okay? Is everything okay? Do you feel okay? Are you sad? Or what, how are you feeling today? You're going to trust how you feel, because children are so intuitive. They're like little sponges, right? If you have children, here's something to try out with them. If you cry in front of them, what do? Do they gravitate towards you, or do they run away? Most children will come and try to soothe you, because your safety means their safety. So if you are destabilized, then they're destabilized. So they want you to feel stable. So they will try to make you feel good. It's really quite interesting. Are all children wired this way? No, there's a majority of children that are. And if you're intuitive, you are wired this way. You are deeply empathetic, you're intuitive, you feel intuitive. Of course, you can feel the energy of spaces and places around you. You can tell when you disappoint someone, and you can tell when someone, isn't happy with your performance or doesn't like you. And your wiring will be then to fawn, to try to create safety for yourself, to make them like you, to be so kind and considerate. I am so kind and considerate. I like that about me, but I don't like when I cross my own boundaries to fawn and appease someone else. So I stopped doing that. Was it overnight? No. And anyone who says that it's overnight is lying to you. It is small increments, right? It's pendulating. You pendulate in and pendulate out. You're kind of stepping in a little bit and feeling what that feels like, and then you step out. And you're trying it with every encounter, right? It's not an overnight thing. So trusting that you are going to build boundaries as you can feel. It's okay for people to be disappointed with you. That was a freeing knowledge thing that I had to learn, right? It's okay to disappoint others. It's okay. You know what? I get disappointed. It's because these people are so amazing. So if I can't see them or it doesn't work out, I get disappointed because I really love them and I want to spend time with them. And it's okay to be disappointed. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean the end of the world, right? But we take it as disapproval, and we can sometimes take disappointment as meaning that we're not good people. Right? And that gets into a whole other realm of psychology. But that intuition then is really born out of trauma. So we know that we have big T trauma, like sexual abuse, violence in the home, domestic violence, addiction, things like that. When you have those things in the home, big T trauma, then we can have a very strong intuitive ability because we had to. Right? We had to make sure we're safe. Is mom in a good mood today? Is dad in a good mood today? Are they fighting? Oh, I could tell as soon as I walked into the home when I came home when one of my parents came home, what kind of mood they were in. I could feel that, right? As a super intuitive child. And that actually became one of my superpowers, right? So I also believe that the soul chooses this kind of scenario for you to be born into so that you can create these superpowers. And then in later life, you can release the parts that are hard or struggly as part of that. Yeah, I just made up word struggly, that we don't have to keep all those, right? Like I don't have to keep the boundary leaks. I can be kind and considerate and yet also allow others to take responsibility for their own needs and disappointments. I don't have to be responsible for everybody's emotions all the time. I had to learn that lesson, right? It was quite a profound day. So, big T trauma, this is when we don't feel safe in the body. So, anytime that you have had issues with someone violating your boundaries, you had to hug creepy Uncle Tom and you didn't want to, or you trusted your parents. I have a client who had a creepy uncle, but you know what? He's an uncle and he took advantage of the situation, and then she was no longer safe. So, in those moments, we then don't feel safe in the body. And if you don't feel safe in your body, guess where your intuition speaks to you through? It's your body, right? So when you can feel your gut response or you can feel your heart starting to flutter, you can feel things in your body, your intuition speaks through your body. So if you're not comfortable in your body, then we'll have a block to intuition. So that's one of the blocks. And the antidote to that is therapy, is somatic therapy. So somatic therapy is moving energy through the body and being in the body, because we actually have more neuroreceptors moving from neurons, moving from the body to the brain than we do having from the brain to the body. So the body is infinitely intelligent. It's way more intelligent. You're wired to have your body tell your brain things more than you are your brain telling your body things, right? So being safe in the body is such an important part of your life. Also, if you are, if you feel like your body has betrayed you, there is such a thing in polyvagal theory, which is a study of the nervous system, a new model of the nervous system that states that when the threat is so large, it will almost kill the energy to your body. And you will sort of be paralyzed in that moment because your body is holding that energy for when you can escape. It's, very similar to if you're watching National Geographic and the tiger clomps down on the deer. And the deer is going to just for a moment, you can see it's still blinking and still breathing, but it's going to be very, very still. And when the tiger tries to get a better bite, what will happen is the deer will bounce up and run away. Right? And you're like, what just happened? That is that nervous system. It's waiting, it's holding all the energy until the threat is not so large and you can run. So when you were in a situation where you were, physically attacked or sexually assaulted, what can happen is your body then will hold that energy until the threat has gone away. And I've heard from many of my clients who have gone through their healing journey is that they really had to learn to trust and love their body because they felt betrayed, that they weren't able to do the thing. But I always like to remind them that your biology was wired to try to keep you safe. You couldn't yell. You couldn't tell them to go screw themselves. You couldn't run away. You had to just be in that moment. And then when your body felt safe, then it was able to jump up when your nervous system allowed, right? So sometimes we're wired in ways that our brain is like telling us we should have done something different, but your body's like, no way we could do that, right? So it's that coherence of having the brain and the body speaking to each other and loving each other. So we could even have healing around loving the body and forgiving the body in ways that maybe we felt it betrayed us, right? So big T trauma, feeling not safe in the body, that's one of the ways. And the antidote is to heal that, is to come back into somatic therapy. Highly recommend a somatic therapist with a psychology background to help you bridge those two things together. Because when you feel safe in the body, then you can hear all the signals of it, right? And then you can also be present because you might disassociate because the body doesn't feel safe. So where does your brain go? Go up into energy instead. So, or not really energy because you're not feeling the intuition piece, but you're gone. You've disassociated, and we want to stay in the body to stay present. So then similarly, small T trauma can also have us to disassociate. And small T trauma can look like feeling like we've got to make sure we're always sort of ahead of the game on what's happening with people and what do people think of us. You can't ever let anyone down, right? It's because you're always sort of managing everyone's responsibilities. You're the rescuer, right? You've got to do everything for everybody. You're always in a place where you are having to be at the service of others. So you can't be, again, it's not in your body, but you're always managing everyone else's expectations. And so when you're in this is kind of the overthinking mind too, but we're going to get to that in a moment. There can be a lot of, again, outside of yourself, to bring your awareness back to self and to trust yourself again. So this can also, small T trauma can be that you thought something was going to go one way and then it didn't, right? So I have a client where they were very young, 5 years old, because we sort of trace back when this pattern of people pleasing came about. And it came back through as we regressed to 5 years old, starting school. Her mom had bought her these smelly markers that were like all the rage, and she was so excited to have them. And she brought them into class. And one of the girls who she had kind of started to talk to and she really liked asked to borrow them. And she said, yes, of course, right? And just thinking, like, with her heart, as children do, sure, you can borrow them. This is my new friend. And the girl took them and wrote her name on them and said that they were hers. So when my client said, no, those are mine, she said, no, they're mine. Look, it has my name on it. And the teacher scolded my client, saying that she was trying to steal the markers. So she had to, come to terms with the fact that these markers were gone. Her mom had bought them to her. Now she's going to have to tell her mom they're gone. And then at recess, this little girl came up to her and pushed her down and said to her, if you tell anyone, I'm going to beat you up. And she's like, okay. And the girl's like, do you want to be my friend? And she kind of had to say yes because this girl was a bully, and they became really good friends. But there was always this underlying fear. There was also this underlying, this girl takes from me, and people who are my friends, I have to give them everything because then it's not, then I can lose them. I can lose my friendships. So it created this kind of pattern in her life where she was no longer trusting herself. Right? She thought this person was going to be her friend, but she didn't. So she actually trusted her friends over herself. and she made a mistake, right? Not made a mistake. She was just being in her heart kind and considerate. And this person showed her who they were. There was no mistake to be made. Now you know better, you do better. But this little girl wanted this friendship so much, connection. She gave up her authenticity so that she could be in this connection for herself. So she started to second guess her intuition because she thought this was the way, right? Same thing like if you decide to go to a party and then something bad happens at the party, or you trust someone and they do something bad to you. Again, there would be this lack of trust for self because what you thought was going to happen didn't actually happen. So that then requires healing, right? That's considered a small t trauma where you're like, okay, how can I come back into trust myself? So that is the antidote, right? Is the healing of trust with self. So we do little things as we listen to our intuition. We can do things where we ask our body or ask ourselves, what should we eat today? And we ask ourselves this or this. And then we eat the thing that our body is saying, this is what I want. Or you hold up two sweaters and you're like, which one do I want to wear? And the body will tell you. Again, the body is where your intuition is speaking to you through. So you will get a sense, right? And there's techniques to doing that. As well. We can hold a sweater and feel like, is this a yes or is it a no? And you just do little things like that, little ways of trusting yourself and learning how to, again, trust your intuition and building up that book of evidence that this is how it works for me. So I would say the majority of the people that come through my intuition classes and MIA Academy are learning to trust themselves again because of little T traumas in their past. And again, this creates patterns in our life where we are, again, not trusting ourselves because the voices of others are so loud. So we stopped listening to ourselves for the sake of connection. We gave up our authenticity. The third and final block of intuition is the loud mind. And I see this a lot with entrepreneurs. Now, the loud mind actually comes from the previous two, small t trauma and big T trauma, because your brain is saying, I didn't anticipate these situations. And now here we are, in problems. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to think of all the situations so that we are never caught off guard again. We are always going to be on guard. And so you're going to think of every situation so that when it happens, you are going to be ready. And now here's the kicker. It's like playing a VLT machine or playing the casino or playing, any kind of gambling game, is that every so often, I would say like 1% of the time, it comes true, right? The situation that you thought about actually happened. And you're like, oh, I was prepared for that. Yay. And that's a win to the brain. That is the most addictive win, to have a random win, right? That's why gambling can be so addictive, because you don't know when it's going to come, but if you keep going, you might get a hit. You might get a hit. When you get a hit, that brain's like, oh my God, this is a rush. Let's try it again, right? And try it again and try it again and try it again. That's why the house always wins. That's why casinos are so rich, because you're not going to always win. You're actually going to lose more than you win. That is same with the overthinking brain, right? It is going to try to think of all the scenarios. And I've said 99% of the time, those scenarios don't come together at all, right? So you end up then wasting a lot of energy and time, sleepless nights, thinking about these things that never come to pass, right? The mind is so loud. And so the antidote to quieting the mind, I'm sure you probably can anticipate, is meditation. And I can already hear somebody going, oh God, it's always meditation. And you know what? It is, because it's the gateway to hearing yourself. And it doesn't have to be quieting the mind so you don't hear anything. It's not oming. It's not sitting in silence, right? You're training your brain in a very kind of slow pace to just learn a new way of being. That's it, right? The brain is neuroplastic. It can change. It can be taught new ways of thinking and being right until the last day that you take your last breath, So don't think that you're too old to learn something new. And a really good meditation teacher is going to start slow. So a really great meditation to learn is counting your breath for 1 minute. That's it. And when you lose count, you got to start again at 1. So you're counting your in breath for 1 minute. And then set the timer for 2 minutes. And then try that for the second week. And then try it again for the third week and see what you can get. And some days are going to be higher than others, because your brain capacity, your mental awareness, the things that are happening in your life You're just not going to be always on. And then try listening to a meditation, a guided meditation that takes you on a journey, that maybe gets you a message from your higher, your spirit guide. I love meditations with an outcome of some kind. I don't want to be just sitting in a meditation floating in water. Like, I really want to get something out of it in terms of a message, or I meet my guides, or I meet my totem animal. Like, let's do something that has an outcome and desire. Especially when I'm teaching beginner intuitives and beginner mediums, is that we then have this ability to come into quiet in the self, because you're only listening to my voice. When you're listening to my voice, there's no voices, there's nothing going on, right? If you have a lot of thoughts too, humming, you can't have intrusive thoughts when you're humming. And another way to stop intrusive thoughts is to say to yourself, I wonder what my next thought will be. And the brain's wondering. It's like, what is it? It's anticipating. It doesn't know. So it'll kind of quiet for a moment. But meditation, starting with a breath meditation and a guided meditation, eventually a mantra meditation, and then maybe eventually you'll move to quiet, which as a medium, we have to move into quiet to hear spirit. So we really have to quieten the mind and learn how to discipline the mind to then have the ability to hear what spirit has to say, hear what our own spirit has to say. So loud mind as well is in that category is fear and stress. When you are very stressed, when there's a lot of fear of like not having enough money, or this Maslow hierarchy of needs, fear, well, even up one is relationships, but the base ones are basic needs: food on the table, money in the bank, right? Like, we at shelter, if you're in war, you're going to have a hard time with that basic need. So meditation is not going to be easy, or maybe even available to you when you're in those basic needs being met. But as you move up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs into self-actualization, now you have space, now you have safety. You need to have safety and space to develop your intuition. You cannot do it when you're in grief. You cannot do it when you're in trauma. You cannot do it if you're in a war zone. Let's be honest. This is a higher actualization of self as we're doing this work. So quieting the mind and allowing it to know that it's safe, and that you're in this place now where we're just having an experience with an open heart and a curious mind, diffusing judgment and just having an experience, right? You're building your book of evidence of how your intuition works for you. And that's it, right? So those are the 3 blocks to your intuition, right? Big T trauma, small T trauma, and the loud mind. But the loud mind is actually part of the first 2, because your mind as a baby is not continuing to try to think of all the situations. As a baby, as a toddler, they're just in the moment. They're just having an experience. And until something unexpected happens and they're caught off guard, then now the child learns, I have to be ahead of the game. I have to anticipate people's needs. I have to make sure that I'm prepared for any situation. And that's where the loud mind can come in. And not everybody develops it, right? Or we'll develop it in our own ways. So think about how this reflects to you in your life. Do you have any of these 3 things? What's your relationship with your intuition? Do you hear it really easily? Or does it have to be kind of louder? Or does your mind have to be quieter to hear it? And what are some of the ways that you quiet your mind, right? There could be walking meditations. There could be like getting out in nature. You could be a runner. That's a really great way to hear yourself sometimes, because you're just in the movement, or your feet hitting the pavement creates a kind of a very steady beat, right? Being in a car as well can be meditative, although you want to be present when you're driving. So it's really interesting, if you are have blocks to your intuition, what can you do today to help quiet it, right? And again, maybe that's therapy, maybe it's learning to be in your body, maybe it's somatic yoga, maybe that's breath work, maybe that is meditation classes. Whatever that is for you, start today, right? And create that strong connection to your intuition, that inner wisdom that belongs to you, because it is going to lead you to paths that are amazing and just for you, that only your soul knows. No one else knows your path but you. Wishing you a wonderful day.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Story of Spirit podcast. I hope you have found inspiration, support, and practical insights to help you align with your soul-led purpose and live a life that sets your soul on fire. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us to reach more listeners and continues to provide valuable content. I sincerely appreciate every share, and I know it is how most people find me. It is because caring people like you have shared me with them at the right and perfect time. For more resources, insights, and to connect with our community, please visit us at www.sheetalstory.com and follow us on Instagram at sheetalstory. Remember, your journey to a more aligned and vibrant life is just the beginning, and I am here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, stay aligned, stay inspired, and keep shining your beautiful light. This is Sheetal Story, signing off from the Story of Spirit podcast. Here's the legal ease that's required by our lawyers. This podcast and the YouTube channel represents the opinions of Sheetal Story and her guests to the show. The content should not be taken as medical, psychological, or financial advice. This series is informational and entertainment purposes only. Because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional, your mental health dream team, your financial advisor, or anyone else that's an expert in the field in where you are thinking of making big choices in your life.